Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge watching the stars through the large window. The ship moved slowly through space near the colony of New Austin. Jake had been doing this job for 10 years and nothing much ever happened out here. His crew was small but good at their work. Lisa Hayes sat at the navigation controls checking their path. Tony Blake worked on engine repairs in the back of the ship. Dr. Kate Sullivan looked at her science readings from her station. The ship suddenly made a loud beeping sound. Lisa looked up from her controls with surprise on her face. She pressed several buttons and the beeping got louder. Jake walked over to her station and looked at the screen. There was something big on their sensors about 2 miles away. It was not moving and did not look like any ship they knew. Jake told Lisa to take them closer but to go slow. The thing on the screen got bigger as they moved toward it. Soon they could see it through the window. The ship was long and dark with strange curves that did not look like human design. Parts of it were broken and there were holes in the side. No lights were on and it seemed dead in space. Tony came to the bridge when he heard the alert sounds. He looked at the strange ship and whistled low. He had never seen anything like it before. Dr. Sullivan was already taking readings with her equipment. The ship was made of materials she could not identify. There were no energy readings coming from it. Jake called the colony to report what they found. Admiral Lucy Grant came on the radio from the colony headquarters. She told them to be very careful but to check if anyone was alive on the strange ship. Jake did not like the idea, but orders were orders. He told Tony to get the boarding equipment ready. The team put on their spacesuits and took tools and weapons with them. Jake, Lisa, and Dr. Sullivan would go over to the strange ship. Tony would stay behind to watch their ship and keep radio contact. The doctor brought her medical kit in case they found survivors. They used their small shuttle to fly over to the damaged ship. Finding a hole in the side that was big enough, Jake flew the shuttle inside. The inside was dark and cold. Their lights showed walls that curved in ways that made no sense. There were symbols on the walls that glowed faintly when their lights hit them. They walked through the ship looking for signs of life. Most of the rooms were empty or filled with broken equipment. The air was breathable but thin. Dr. Sullivan's scanner showed that someone or something had been living on the ship recently. In what looked like the main room of the ship, they found her. A woman lay on a strange bed that seemed to be made of the same material as the ship walls. She was unconscious but breathing. She looked human, but something about her seemed different. Her skin was pale and her hair was long and black. When Jake shined his light on her face, they all stopped and stared. Her eyes were open now and they were purple. Not just purple, but a deep violet color that seemed to change and move like liquid. She looked at each of them without fear. When she tried to sit up, Dr. Sullivan helped her. The woman spoke, and her voice was clear and strong. She said her name was Zara and asked where she was. Jake was surprised that she spoke perfect English. He told her they were humans from the colony of New Austin. She nodded, like this made sense to her, but Jake could see confusion in her strange eyes. Dr. Sullivan checked Zara with her medical scanner. The readings were very odd. Zara looked human, but the scanner showed metal objects inside her head. They were small but complex, and the scanner could not tell what they were for. When the doctor asked about them, Zara touched her head and said she did not remember. Zara could not remember how she got on the ship or where the ship came from. She did not know how long she had been there. She knew her name and she could speak English, but everything else was like fog in her mind. Jake decided they needed to take her back to their ship. As they helped Zara to the shuttle, strange things began to happen. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter when she walked past them. Equipment that had been broken started making sounds. Dr. Sullivan's scanner began giving readings that made no sense. Back on the horizon's edge, Tony was waiting for them. When he saw Zara, he stepped back in surprise. Her purple eyes seemed to look right through him. She was polite and quiet, but Tony felt uncomfortable around her. Something about her made the hair on his arm stand up. Dr. Sullivan took Zara to the medical bay to check her more carefully. The metal objects in her head were definitely not human technology. They were connected to her brain in ways that should have killed her. But she seemed healthy and strong. The objects were active and sending signals, but the doctor could not tell what they were doing. Jake called Admiral Grant to report what they had found. The Admiral was very interested in Zara and told them to bring her to the research station on New Austin right away. She wanted their best scientist to study Zara and the strange metal objects in her head. As they started the trip back to the colony, Jake noticed that his crew was acting strange. Lisa kept looking at Zara when she thought no one was watching. Tony worked on equipment that did not need fixing. Dr. Sullivan asked Zara the same questions over and over. That night, Jake had the strangest dream of his life. He was walking through a city that was bigger than anything humans had ever built. The buildings were alive and moved like they were breathing. In the sky, there were machines that looked like giant insects made of metal and light. Everything was beautiful and terrible at the same time. When he woke up, Jake found that Lisa, Tony, and Dr. Sullivan had all had the same dream. They compared notes and realized that every detail was exactly the same. It was like they had all been in the same place together. The only difference was that in each person's dream, Zara had been there too, watching them with her purple eyes that seemed to know secrets they could not understand. Jake looked out at the stars and wondered what they had really found on that dead ship. Zara seemed human, but everything about her suggested otherwise. The dreams felt more real than most of his actual memories. Something big was happening, and he was not sure if it was good or bad for humanity. The research station on New Austin was busy when the Horizon's Edge arrived. Dr. Kate Sullivan led Zara through the white halls, while security guards watched from a distance. The station was home to the colony's best scientists, and they were all curious about the woman with purple eyes. Dr. Carl Weber was the head of brain science at the station. He had studied human minds for 20 years, but had never seen anything like the scans of Zara's head. The metal objects inside her brain were connected to every part of her nervous system. They should have made her sick or killed her, but instead, they seemed to make her stronger. Security Chief Ryan Park did not like having Zara on the station. His job was to keep everyone safe, and she made his equipment act strange. Computers would freeze when she walked past them. Lights would flicker, and sometimes go out completely. Radio signals became unclear when she was nearby. Zara was given a room in the medical section where she could rest. She was always polite and tried to help the scientist understand what was happening to her. But she truly did not remember anything about her past or how she had gotten the metal objects in her head. When she tried to think about it, she would get terrible headaches and her purple eyes would glow brighter. Amy Chen was a young research helper who worked with Dr. Sullivan. She was the first to notice that the dreams were spreading. Everyone who spent time near Zara started having the same strange dreams about the giant city and the flying machines. The dreams were always exactly the same and felt more real than normal dreams. Dr. Weber tried many different ways to study the metal objects in Zara's brain. X-rays showed them clearly but could not tell what they were made of. Magnetic scanners would not work on them at all. When he tried to use electrical tests, the objects would send out signals that hurt his equipment. 3 days after Zara arrived at the station, something new happened. She was talking with Dr. Sullivan about the colony when suddenly her voice changed completely. She began speaking in a language that no one recognized. The words sounded musical but also somehow mechanical. Her purple eyes glowed so bright that people had to look away. During this episode, Zara walked to a computer and began typing codes that made the machine work faster than it ever had before. She drew pictures of machines and buildings that were far beyond human technology. When Dr. Weber asked her how she knew these things, she looked at him with confusion and said she did not know what he was talking about. The episodes became more frequent. Sometimes Zara would speak the strange language for hours. Other times she would draw complex diagrams or solve math problems that the colony's best scientists could not understand. During these times, her personality seemed completely different. She would stand straighter, and her voice would become commanding and strong. Amy Chen started keeping detailed notes about the episodes. She noticed that they happened more often when Zara was stressed or when too many people were around her. During the episodes, everyone nearby would get severe headaches followed by flashes of memories that were not their own. These memory flashes were always about the same things. A race of beings that could build cities from living metal, machines that could think and feel like people, technologies that could change the shape of planets. But always there was a sense of terrible danger, coming from somewhere far away. Dr. Weber made an important discovery when he was studying brain scans taken during one of Zara's episodes. The metal objects in her head were not just connected to her brain, they were actually controlling parts of it. But the strange thing was that they seemed to be holding something back, rather than adding something new. Peter Davis was the administrator, in charge of the research station. He received reports from other colonies about strange events happening wherever Zara had been. Ships had experienced equipment failures. People had strange dreams. Some colonists reported seeing flashes of images that were not from their own lives. The breakthrough came when Amy Chen suggested that maybe the metal objects were not part of Zara, but something separate that was trapped inside them. Dr. Weber ran new tests based on this idea. The results showed that there were actually two different types of brain activity in Zara's head. One was clearly human, but the other was something else entirely. Working late one night, Dr. Weber discovered patterns in the strange brain signals. They were not random, but seemed to be trying to communicate. When he played the signals through, the computer as sound, they sounded almost like speech, but in no language anyone knew. The next morning, Dr. Weber called a meeting with all the senior scientists. He explained that he believed there was another consciousness trapped inside the metal objects in Zara's head. This other mind was trying to communicate, but could only do so when it took control of Zara's body during the episodes. Dr. Sullivan was fascinated by this possibility. She suggested they try to make contact with this other consciousness directly. Dr. Weber was worried that this might be dangerous for Zara, but she insisted that she wanted to help. She said the headaches were getting worse, and she could feel something, trying to break free in her mind. They set up a special room with equipment to monitor both Zara's human brain activity and the signals from the metal objects. Amy Chen would watch for changes in the patterns while Dr. Weber tried to establish communication. Ryan Park stood guard outside in case something went wrong. As soon as they began the test, Zara's eyes began to glow. Her voice changed to the commanding tone they had heard before. But this time, instead of speaking the unknown language, she spoke in English. Her words were formal and strange, but everyone could understand them. She said that she was not Zara, and that Zara was not really who they thought she was. She was a prisoner inside the metal objects and had been trapped there for a very long time. She had been waiting for minds like theirs to make contact because only certain types of consciousness could hear her. The voice explained that it came from a race that had lived long before humans existed. Its people had built great works throughout the galaxy, but had been destroyed by enemies that consumed both flesh and mind. It had hidden itself in the metal objects as the last hope of its species. When Dr. Weber asked why it had chosen to contact humans, the voice said that human minds were different from others it had encountered. Humans could think in ways that its enemies could not predict or understand. This made humans valuable allies and possibly the key to defeating the ancient enemy. But the voice warned that the enemy had not been destroyed. They had only been delayed. They were still out there in the dark between stars, growing stronger and searching for new worlds to devour. They had already detected the signals from human colonies and were coming. As the voice spoke, everyone in the room began to see images in their minds. Vast ships that looked like living creatures moving through space. Planets stripped bare of all life. Civilizations that had fought bravely, but had been completely destroyed. The images were so real that some of the scientists became sick. The voice said that it could teach humans how to fight these enemies, but only if they were willing to join their minds with its ancient knowledge. The process would be dangerous and might change whoever agreed to it forever. But without this knowledge, humanity would fall just like all the others. When the episode ended, Zara collapsed and had to be taken to the medical bay. She remembered nothing of what the voice had said. Dr. Weber and his team looked at each other with fear and excitement. They had made contact with something that claimed to be millions of years old, and it was warning them about a threat to all human life. That night, the dreams that everyone experienced were different. Instead of the beautiful city, they saw the destruction of worlds and the advance of something dark and hungry through the galaxy. When they woke up, they all knew that their lives and the future of humanity had changed forever. Dr. Weber worked day and night to find a safe way to communicate with the ancient consciousness trapped in Zara's head. Nina Ross, the station's computer expert, helped him build special equipment that could translate the strange signals into words humans could understand. They had to be very careful because each contact session left Zara weak and confused. The ancient being called itself the Architect. Through careful sessions of communication, it began to tell them about its people, a race called the Shapers. The Shapers had lived millions of years ago when the galaxy was young and full of new civilizations. They were master builders who could create living cities and machines that grew like plants. Captain Morrison stayed at the research station to help coordinate the communication efforts. His diplomatic officer, Ellen Price, worked with Dr. Weber to ask the right questions. They learned that the Shapers had been peaceful explorers who helped young races develop technology. They had built wonders throughout the galaxy and shared their knowledge freely. The Architect explained that everything changed when the Shapers encountered an enemy unlike any they had faced before. These creatures called themselves the Devourers, and they fed on consciousness itself. They could absorb the minds of entire civilizations and use that knowledge to become stronger and smarter. Unlike normal enemies who wanted land or resources, the Devourers wanted to consume every thinking being in the galaxy. They would attack a world and drain the minds of everyone living there. The victims would still be alive but empty, like walking shells with no thoughts or memories. Dr. Sullivan asked why the Devourers were so dangerous compared to other threats. The Architect showed them images through Zara's consciousness. The Devourers were not fully physical beings. They existed partly in normal space and partly in the realm of thought itself. This made them nearly impossible to fight with normal weapons. As the Devourers consumed more civilizations, they became better at understanding how different minds worked. They could adapt to new forms of consciousness quickly and find ways to drain them. The Architect said that 17 different galaxy-spanning civilizations had fallen to them over millions of years. The Shapers had tried to fight the Devourers using their most advanced technology. They built weapons that could affect both physical and mental realms. They created defenses that could protect minds from being drained. For a while it seemed like they might win, but the Devourers learned from each battle. They found ways around the Shaper defenses and began consuming Shaper worlds one by one. The Architect had been the chief designer of their greatest weapons and had watched its people slowly lose the war despite their technological superiority. Intelligence Officer Greg Stone had been monitoring deep space communications from the colony. He brought disturbing news to the research team. Several ships at the edge of human space had gone missing in the past month. The disappearances were happening in a pattern that suggested something was moving toward human territory. The Architect confirmed their worst fears. The Devourers had detected the radio signals that humans had been sending into space for decades. They were drawn to new forms of consciousness like hunters following a scent. The missing ships were probably the first victims of Devourer scout forces. Nina Ross asked how humanity could possibly fight enemies that had defeated civilizations far more advanced than theirs. The Architect explained that human consciousness was different from anything it had encountered before. Human minds were chaotic and unpredictable in ways that made them harder for the Devourers to understand. Most civilizations developed along logical patterns that the Devourers could learn to counter. But humans were illogical and creative in ways that even the Architect found surprising. This randomness might be the key to creating defenses that the Devourers could not adapt to. The Architect revealed that it had been searching the galaxy for humanity after detecting their radio signals decades ago. It had found Zara's body on a dead world and modified it to be compatible with human neural patterns. Zara was not really human, but a biological construct designed to house the Architect's consciousness during its search. The plan had been to find humans and offer them Shaper technology in exchange for helping to fight the Devourers. But the containment system holding the Architect's consciousness was breaking down. It had maybe days before it would die and all Shaper knowledge would be lost forever. Dr. Weber asked if there was a way to transfer the Architect's knowledge to a human mind without killing the person. The Architect said it was possible but extremely dangerous. The human brain would need to be modified to hold both human and shaper consciousness at the same time. The person who volunteered would gain access to millions of years of shaper technology and knowledge about fighting the devourers. But they might lose parts of their human personality or even die from the mental strain. The architect could not guarantee that the volunteer would survive the process. Ellen Price asked about other options for fighting the devourers. The architect explained that there were hidden shaper weapons scattered throughout the galaxy. These weapons were designed to disrupt consciousness-based attacks, but they required both shaper technology and human creativity to operate effectively. The weapons alone would not be enough to stop the devourers. Someone would need to coordinate the defense of the entire galaxy, and that required understanding both human and shaper ways of thinking. Only a joined consciousness could do this successfully. Amy Chen had been monitoring Zara's condition throughout the communication sessions. She reported that Zara was getting weaker with each contact. The containment system was failing faster than expected. They might have only hours instead of days before the architect's consciousness dispersed and was lost. Greg Stone brought more bad news from his monitoring station. The deep space sensors were detecting massive objects moving toward human space at incredible speed. The objects were too large to be ships and moved in ways that suggested they were alive. The Devourer main force was coming and would reach the outer colonies in less than 3 months. The research team realized they were facing an impossible choice. They could try to save the architect's knowledge by risking a human life in the transfer process. Or they could let the ancient consciousness die and face the Devourers without the weapons and knowledge needed to fight them. Dr. Sullivan pointed out that the choice might not be theirs to make. The Devourers were coming whether humanity was ready or not. Their only hope was to learn everything they could from the architect and prepare for a war unlike anything humans had ever imagined. The architect made one final communication before the session ended. It said that it had chosen to contact humanity, not just because human minds were chaotic and creative. It had detected something else in human consciousness that it had never encountered before. Humans had the ability to sacrifice themselves for others, even when they gained nothing in return. This quality of selfless sacrifice was something the Devourers could not understand or counter. It made humans dangerous to creatures that existed only to consume and destroy. The architect believed that this human trait, combined with shaper technology, might be the key to finally defeating the ancient enemy. As Zara collapsed from the strain of the communication, the research team knew they had to make a decision quickly. The fate of humanity and possibly the entire galaxy depended on whether they could find someone willing to risk everything to gain the knowledge needed to fight an enemy that had never been defeated. Captain Morrison looked around the room at his team and the scientists who had become his friends. He could see the fear and determination in their faces. Someone would have to volunteer for the consciousness transfer, and they all knew it. The question was who would be brave enough to take that risk when failure meant not just death but the end of human civilization. The meeting room at the research station was quiet as the team discussed who would volunteer for the dangerous procedure. Dr. Weber explained again that joining human consciousness with the architect's knowledge could kill the volunteer or drive them insane. But without that knowledge, humanity had no chance against the Devourers. Admiral Grant had arrived from colony headquarters after hearing about the threat. She listened to the reports with growing concern. The missing ships at the EI, Galaxy's Edge, were just the beginning. If the Devourers were really coming, every human colony would need to prepare for war. Dr. Sullivan suggested that they should ask for volunteers from the entire colony. Surely someone would be willing to take the risk to save humanity. But the IJAB architect had warned that not every human mind could handle the joining process. The volunteer needed to have specific mental qualities that were rare. Jake Morrison stood up and said he would do it. His crew tried to talk him out of it, but he had made up his mind. As a ship captain, he was used to making life and death decisions. He had led people through dangerous situations before, and this was just another mission that someone had to complete. Ellen Price argued that Morrison was too valuable as a leader to risk in the procedure. The colony would need experienced commanders to fight the Devourers. But Morrison pointed out that they would need the architect's knowledge even more. Without it, all the commanders in the galaxy would not be enough. Dr. Weber ran tests on Morrison to see if his mind was compatible with the joining process. The tests showed that Morrison had the right kind of mental flexibility to handle both human and alien consciousness. His years of command had taught him to think in multiple ways at the same time. Tony Blake and Dr. Ben Carter worked with Nina Ross to modify the medical equipment for the procedure. They had to combine human technology with the strange devices found on Zara's alien ship. The architect provided instructions through Zara, but each communication session left her weaker. The procedure would take place in a specially prepared room surrounded by both human computers and alien technology. Morrison would be connected to machines that could monitor both his human brain patterns and the architect's consciousness. If something went wrong, they would have seconds to disconnect him. Zara insisted on helping with the procedure even though it might kill her. She said that she was not really human anyway, and her only purpose was to carry the architect's consciousness to humanity. If she died helping to save human civilization, her existence would have meaning. As they prepared for the procedure, reports came in from the outer colonies about strange effects in space, near where ships had disappeared. The space itself seemed to be changing, becoming darker and more empty. Sensors could not get clear readings from those areas, as if something was blocking all signals. Greg Stone's intelligence reports confirmed their worst fears. The objects moving toward human space were definitely the Devourer main force. They were massive beyond anything humans had ever seen, each one the size of a small moon. Worse, they seemed to be bringing the empty space effect with them as they traveled. The night before the procedure, Morrison could not sleep. He walked through the research station thinking about what he was about to do. If the procedure worked, he would gain knowledge that could save humanity. If it failed, he would die and humanity would face the Devourers alone. Lisa Hayes found him in the observation deck looking out at the stars. She told him that the entire crew supported his decision, even though they were scared for him. Tony. Blake had said that Morrison was the bravest person he had ever known. Dr. Sullivan believed that if anyone could survive the joining process, it would be him. The next morning, Morrison lay down on the modified medical table surrounded by both human and alien machines. Dr. Weber and his team made final checks on all the equipment. Zara was connected to the same network so that the architect could guide the process from inside her mind. As the procedure began, Morrison felt his consciousness expanding in ways he had never imagined. The architect's knowledge flowed into his mind like a river of information spanning millions of years. He saw the rise and fall of entire civilizations, technologies beyond human understanding, and the terrible history of the Devourer Wars. The pain was incredible as his human brain tried to process alien concepts and memories. For a moment, Morrison thought his mind would break under the strain. But something inside him, the part that had always pushed him to protect others, held his consciousness together. Through the joining process, Morrison experienced the complete destruction of the Shaper civilization. He felt the architect's grief and rage as its people were consumed one by one. He understood the desperate hope that had driven the ancient being to search the galaxy for allies who could succeed where the Shapers had failed. But Morrison also brought something new to the joining. His human perspective showed the architect different ways of thinking about the Devourer problem. Humans did not just build defenses against enemies. They found ways to turn enemy strengths into weaknesses and create victories from impossible situations. When the procedure ended, Morrison opened his eyes and looked around the room with vision that was both human and alien. He could see energy, patterns that had been invisible before. He understood how the equipment around him worked not just as machines but as extensions of conscious will. Dr. Weber asked Morrison how he felt. Morrison's voice was the same, but there was something deeper behind it, as if two people were speaking together. He said that he was still human but also more than human. The architect's knowledge was part of him now, but it had not replaced his human thoughts and feelings. Through Morrison, the architect revealed the locations of hidden weapon platforms throughout the galaxy. These weapons had been built by the Shapers as a last line of defense but had never been activated. They were designed to attack consciousness itself, the one thing the Devourers could not defend against. But the weapons required human creativity to reach their full potential. Shaper technology was logical and predictable. Human innovation was chaotic and unexpected. Together, they could create combinations that even the Devourers had never encountered before. Morrison stood up from the medical table and walked to the star charts on the wall. With his enhanced vision, he could see patterns in space that revealed the Devourer approach routes. They were not just moving randomly toward human space. They were following specific paths that would let them consume the most populated worlds first. Nina Ross asked Morrison if he could access the hidden weapon systems from the research station. Morrison studied the alien technology they had brought from Zara's ship. With his new knowledge, he could see that it was actually a control interface for the ancient weapons. The architect had planned this moment for decades. As Morrison began activating the hidden weapons, alarms started going off throughout the research station. Rachel Stone at the communications center reported that they were receiving emergency signals from the edge of human space. The Devourer advance force had arrived 3 weeks ahead of schedule and was attacking the outer colonies. The battle for humanity's survival had begun, and Morrison was the only person with the knowledge needed to coordinate their defense. But even with Shaper weapons and human creativity, the fight would be close. The Devourers had consumed 17 civilizations and learned from each victory. Morrison looked at his team with eyes that held both human determination and ancient wisdom. He told them that the next few days would decide whether humanity joined the long list of extinct civilizations or became the first species to defeat the Devourers. Either way, they would face their destiny together. Admiral Grant received the activation codes for human military forces throughout the colonies. Every ship and weapon would be needed for the coming battle. But their real advantage would not be superior firepower. It would be the unpredictable nature of human consciousness joined with technology that the enemy had never faced before. As reports of the Devourer attacks continued to arrive, Morrison began coordinating the greatest military campaign in human history. The fate of not just humanity but every future civilization in the galaxy depended on whether the chaos of human thinking could overcome an enemy that had never known defeat. The command center at New Austin became the heart of humanity's defense as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Morrison stood before a massive display showing the positions of both human forces and the advancing Devourers. His enhanced consciousness allowed him to process information from hundreds of sources at once while maintaining his human intuition about battle tactics. The outer colonies of Fairmont and Sterling had gone completely silent after the first Devourer attacks. Ships sent to investigate found the planet still there but empty of all consciousness. The colonists walked around like living ghosts, breathing and moving, but with no thoughts or memories left inside their minds. Dr. Sullivan worked with her science teams to understand how the Devourer attacks actually worked. The creatures seemed to project fields that drained consciousness from any thinking being within range. But Morrison's joined knowledge revealed that the process was not instant. There was a brief window where properly protected minds could resist the draining effect. Admiral Grant coordinated the evacuation of the most vulnerable colonies, while Morrison activated the first of the hidden Shaper weapons. The ancient platforms had been sleeping in space for millions of years, disguised as asteroids or hidden inside gas clouds. When Morrison sent the activation signals, they began powering up with energy signatures unlike anything humans had ever created. Tony Blake led teams of engineers in modifying human ships to work with Shaper technology. The combination was difficult because human engineering was based on practical solutions, while Shaper technology was designed around consciousness and will. But the engineers found that human creativity could make the alien systems work in ways their original builders had never imagined. Lisa Hayes commanded a squadron of modified ships that served as Morrison's mobile headquarters. Her navigation skills, enhanced by Shaper knowledge downloaded through Morrison, allowed her to plot courses through space that avoided the worst effects of the Devourer advance. The enemy seemed to create dead zones where normal physics worked differently. The first major battle took place near the mining colony of Red Rock. A Devourer scout force consisting of 3 massive organic ships approached the system, trailing fields of dark energy that made nearby space appear to twist and bend. Morrison coordinated the human response from his command ship, using both tactical knowledge and alien technology. The human fleet attacked using conventional weapons at first, but their missiles and energy beams passed through the Devourer ships without causing damage. The creatures existed partly outside normal space, making them nearly impossible to hit with physical weapons. But Morrison had expected this and activated the first Shaper weapon platform. The ancient weapon fired a beam of pure consciousness at the lead Devourer ship. The creature's defenses, designed to absorb and deflect mental energy, suddenly faced something completely unexpected. The Shaper technology, modified by human creativity, attacked the Devourer's consciousness in ways that caused it actual pain. For the first time in millions of years, a Devourer retreated from battle. The creature's mental scream echoed across space, causing equipment failures on both human and alien ships. But the weapon had worked, proving that the enemy could be hurt and possibly defeated. Nina Ross monitored communications from across human space as word of the victory spread. Colonies that had been preparing to evacuate instead began organizing their defenses. The knowledge that the Devourers could be fought gave people hope and determination they had not felt since the attacks began. But Morrison knew that the victory at Red Rock was just the beginning. The main Devourer force was still approaching, and they would adapt their tactics based on what they had learned from the scout battle. The enemy's greatest strength was their ability to learn from each encounter and become harder to defeat. Dr. Weber worked with the medical teams to study the effects of Devourer attacks on human consciousness. They found that people who had been partially drained could sometimes recover if treated quickly enough. The human mind seemed more resilient than those of other species the Devourers had encountered. Zara, though weakened by the joining procedure, insisted on helping with the defense efforts. Her connection to the architect's original consciousness gave her insights that even Morrison's enhanced mind could not access. She worked with Amy Chen to identify weaknesses in Devourer psychology that could be exploited. The breakthrough came when Zara realized that the Devourer's greatest weakness was also their greatest strength. They consumed consciousness to become more powerful, but this made them dependent on having thinking beings to feed on. If they could be cut off from their food source, they would begin to weaken and eventually die. Morrison used this knowledge to develop a new strategy. Instead of trying to destroy the Devourers directly, human forces would create zones of empty space around them. The Shaper weapons could disrupt consciousness in specific areas, making it impossible for the creatures to feed while they were trapped inside these zones. The plan required perfect coordination between human creativity and Shaper technology. Morrison's enhanced consciousness became the central hub that connected every ship, weapon, and defensive system in the human fleet. He could feel the thoughts and intentions of thousands of people working together toward a single goal. When the main Devourer force arrived at the edge of human space, they faced something no civilization had ever attempted before. Instead of trying to defend their worlds directly, the humans had created a massive trap spanning multiple star systems. The Shaper weapon platforms had been arranged to create overlapping fields of consciousness disruption. The Devourers, confident from millions of years of easy victories, moved into the trap without realizing the danger. They began their standard attack pattern, sending out waves of consciousness-draining energy to weaken the human defenses before closing in to feed. But the human fleet did not behave like previous enemies. Instead of fighting defensively, they used Morrison's enhanced tactical knowledge to attack in ways the Devourers had never seen. Human ships would appear from impossible angles, strike with weapons that should not have worked, and disappear before the enemy could respond. The battle reached its climax when the largest Devourer ship, a creature the size of a small moon, moved toward the heavily populated world of New Austin. Morrison realized that conventional tactics would not be enough to stop something so massive and ancient. The creature had probably consumed hundreds of civilizations personally. Zara made the decision that saved humanity and countless future civilizations. She volunteered to allow the architect's consciousness to merge completely with the weapon network, using her body as a conduit to channel power from every shaper platform simultaneously. The process would certainly kill her, but it would create an attack the Devourers could not defend against. As Zara sacrificed herself, the Architect's ancient consciousness flowed through the weapon network with a force that had been building for millions of years. The combined attack did not just target the Devourer ships, but reached into the realm of pure thought where the creatures truly existed. For the first time since their species began, the Devourers experienced something they could not consume or understand. The attack was powered not just by advanced technology but by human emotions that the ancient creatures had never encountered. Love, sacrifice, hope, and determination became weapons that struck at the core of what the Devourers were. The massive Devourer ship stopped moving and began to break apart as its consciousness was disrupted beyond repair. The smaller creatures in the fleet, suddenly cut off from their leader's coordination, became confused and vulnerable. Human forces pressed their advantage, using the chaos to destroy or drive off the remaining enemies. When the battle ended, humanity had achieved something no other civilization had managed in millions of years. They had not just survived a Devourer attack, but had actually defeated the ancient enemy. The weapon network, now permanently powered by the Architect's sacrifice, created a barrier that would prevent the Devourers from entering the galaxy again. Morrison, forever changed by his joining with alien consciousness, became humanity's first ambassador to the remaining peaceful species in the galaxy. His enhanced understanding allowed him to communicate with civilizations that had hidden from the Devourers for millions of years, afraid to reveal themselves. The victory at New Austin marked the beginning of a new age for humanity. With access to shaper technology and the knowledge gained from defeating an ancient enemy, humans became the galaxy's new protectors. They began building ships that combined human innovation with alien wisdom, preparing to explore beyond their home galaxy and seek out other civilizations that might need protection. Dr. Sullivan established the first schools where humans learned to operate shaper technology through intuition and creativity rather than rigid programming. The chaotic nature of human consciousness, which had once seemed like a weakness, became humanity's greatest strength in mastering tools designed by logical minds. Years later, as Morrison stood on the bridge of the first human-shaper hybrid ship, he remembered Zara's sacrifice and the ancient being that had trusted humanity with its people's greatest legacy.